They came from a planet that should have ended them. A world forged in chaos, where the ground splits without warning, the air burns in storms, and the oceans rise without mercy. Predators sharpened by evolution, viruses with no cure, fire, ice impact, decay. A death world, class 9.7, uninhabitable by almost every known species. And yet, they thrived. Not because they were immune to suffering, but because they refused to kneel to it. They didn't adapt by hiding. They adapted by challenging everything. They looked into the mouth of extinction and said, "Try harder." And then, they left. They broke gravity, bent light, cracked open the sky. They weren't invited into the galaxy. They arrived, unannounced, unprepared, and completely unwilling to stay where they were told. The galaxy, built on structure, on consensus, on rules, was not ready. Because humans don't think like the rest of us. They don't fear what we fear. They don't stop when we stop. And when every protocol says, "This is where you fall," they say, "Let's see what happens if I don't." They walk into death like it's a malfunction they can fix. They smile at catastrophe. And sometimes, they win. This isn't fiction. This isn't myth. This is a data set the galaxy still doesn't know how to process. A warning written in emergency logs. A miracle repeated in black box recordings. A pattern the universe keeps trying and failing to explain. And this is the story of what happened when just one of them stepped aboard a ship where everything made sense, where logic ruled, where caution reigned, where risk was managed and danger was avoided. He didn't follow the rules. He rewrote them. They thought he was a mistake, an accident, a liability. They were wrong. He was the most dangerous asset they'd ever have. And the reason they are still alive. Stay with us. Because once you understand why every space captain wants a human, you may never see your own species the same way again. Some called it mercy. Others called it madness. But deep within the sealed halls of the Council, behind layers of encrypted deliberations and silence orders, there was one word that kept resurfacing in the reports, again and again. Unkillable. How do you categorize a species that survives every environment designed to eliminate life? How do you reason with creatures who treat near-death experiences the same way others treat awkward social encounters? Rumors spread like solar flares. A ship lost in a plasma storm, only the human made it back, dragging 2 crewmates in a damaged escape pod, laughing. A mining colony overrun by acidic spores, records show the human set the nest on fire, from the inside, while humming something called Highway to Hell. Most species fear death. Humans seem to negotiate with it. And win. That's when a new question emerged. A question no one wanted to ask out loud. What happens when a species stops seeing danger as dangerous? The answer, as it turns out, was already en route. Aboard a ship called the Celestial Bargain. And inside its sealed hull, a single human was about to rewrite everything the galaxy thought it knew about survival, risk, and madness. Captain CTHB sat motionless in his quarters, surrounded by sterile precision. 6 limbs folded in perfect symmetry. Compound eyes unblinking as streams of performance data floated in the air before him. Charts, graphs, curves, trends, all of them mocking him. The celestial bargain had always been reliable, efficient, predictable. Its systems were tuned to perfection. Its crew handpicked for optimal compatibility and cross-species functionality. And yet, their ranking had dropped. Their delivery times lagged. Their projected income was disappointing. Worse, there was no flaw to fix. No malfunction. No weak link. Except perhaps the absence of one. The captain's mandibles clicked in quiet contemplation. He tapped a data line that glowed an angry crimson. Nebula Nomad, 22% efficiency increase since onboarding human crew member. Stellar Surplus, 34% maintenance cost reduction. Human noted. The polished drift, crew morale spike, post-human integration. Note, unexplained increase in laughter. Laughter? He leaned back slightly, segmented plates flexing along his thorax. They are soft, messy, prone to leaking. Unstable emotional regulators, he muttered aloud, almost as if saying it again would make it more believable. They go unconscious for 1/3 of the standard cycle. They require sugar. He let that word hang in the air like a contaminant. Sugar. It wasn't just illogical. It was unsettling. Another report scrolled past. Captain Threx of the Mercury Gale reports their human engineer survived an engine plasma burst. Treated injury with burn cream and a nap. Returned to duty in 12 minutes. Captain CTHB blinked slowly. Nap, he whispered. What manner of biological design allowed for recovery from plasma trauma via unconscious rest? A new alert pulsed in his peripheral vision. The AI had flagged an anomaly in psychological telemetry across the fleet. Ships with human crew members displayed elevated anxiety levels, followed by measurable performance spikes. Tension, then triumph. Chaos, then results. He studied the numbers. Illogical. Irrational. But profitable. And so, the unthinkable began to take shape in his mind. Not as an idea, but as a creeping inevitability. He pulled up the recruitment terminal. The interface pulsed quietly, waiting. He hesitated. Not out of fear. No. Vexans didn't fear. They calculated. And this choice was statistically dangerous. He extended one claw toward the console. Entered the word slowly, like casting a spell he didn't understand. Wanted, human crew member. Position, operations specialist. Requirements, ability to lift 20 units. No excessive environmental accommodations. Must sign extensive liability waivers. Must not die easily. His eyes lingered on the final line. Must not die easily. No species should require that disclaimer. And yet, here they were. He pressed submit. The screen blinked once. A chime rang low and metallic, like something ancient had just awakened. Then silence. Moments later, The ship's emotional atmosphere sensors activated. Ship-wide anxiety has increased by 47%. Security Officer Garion has requested clarification on insurance policy renewal. Medical Officer has requested sedatives for self-use. Captain CTHB closed the notifications. He stared into the dim glow of the chamber, alone with his thoughts. He had done it. He had invited the storm. And somewhere, on some distant planet, a human had just received the invitation. The kind of human that wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't overthink. The kind that would show up smiling, unarmored, unafraid, ready to walk into the cold steel belly of a ship full of aliens and call it home. The airlock opened with a hiss. Not the usual kind, the clean, clinical release of pressurized air. This hiss carried tension, like a held breath finally exhaled, too slowly. Captain CTHB stood motionless. His claws tapped the floor in sequence, calculating probabilities. He was expecting something fragile, something weak, something manageable. What stepped through the threshold defied all prediction. Bipedal, light-skinned, unarmored, exposed. The human had arrived. No protective suit. No sealed oxygen reserve. Not even reinforced boots. Just fabric, soft, absorbent fabric covering a body made mostly of water and bone. It smiled. It smiled. Rows of pale teeth flashed in the artificial light like tiny blades behind stretched lips. The expression triggered 12 different emergency threat responses in the ship's security database. The smile remained. "Hey there," the creature said, its voice loud, direct, disturbingly confident. "I'm Jace. Jace Carson. Operations Specialist. I think I'm the guy you hired." The captain's thorax clicked involuntarily. "Where is your environmental protection?" he asked, his voice sharp and distant, as if trying not to breathe the same air. "Oh, didn't need it," Jace replied, waving a hand casually. "Ship's readings looked fine. I've worked in worse." "Worked in worse?" The crew exchanged glances, antennae stiffening, tendrils retracting, exoskeletons flexing in subtle fight or flight postures. "Worse than a calibrated alien merchant vessel?" The Fleb navigator oozed backward, leaving a faint acidic residue on the floor. A defensive secretion, uncontrollable when threatened. The Garian security officer instinctively slid his claws into a half-drawn position, non-lethal stance, but ready. Jace just stood there, looking around like a tourist. "This is awesome," he said, eyes scanning the walls, the blinking sensors, the silence. "Kinda smells like metal and algae. I like it." He dropped his duffel bag with a thud. Inside the bag, something rattled. No one knew what. The captain made a note to have it scanned later. "I brought my own tools." "Hope that's cool." No one had moved. The ship's AI chimed in, voice monotone but strained. "Alert. Crew emotional stability has dropped below protocol thresholds. Recommend immediate intervention." CTHB answered flatly. "Stand down." The human turned toward the captain, holding out one hand with fingers splayed. "So, who's gonna show me my bunk?" The gesture was foreign. The fingers looked like claws with the ends filed down. The fleb pulsed a warning color across its membrane. Danger. The captain hesitated. He had read the protocols. This was called a handshake. A greeting. Not a threat. Allegedly. Still, none of the crew moved. So Jace shrugged. No big deal. I'll find it. I've got a good sense of direction. Unless your gravity shifts. That always messes me up. He turned and strolled down the corridor. Just like that. As if he owned the ship. As if he had no idea that every eye, every sensor, every heartbeat in the corridor was watching him in stunned, silent disbelief. The environmental sensors recalibrated in his wake. The temperature dipped 2 degrees without explanation. The oxygen filters began working harder. The AI detected a 9% fluctuation in atmospheric carbon due to increased respiration from the crew. The captain stared down the hallway, eyes wide. He had invited a predator in. Not one with fangs or venom, but with chaos. Controlled chaos. The kind you couldn't prepare for. And somewhere, deep in the ship's belly, the reactor hummed. As if it, too, sensed something had changed. The chaos didn't erupt all at once. It seeped in slowly like radiation. Invisible at first. Then unmistakable. Hour 1, a loud crash echoed from the maintenance corridor. The human had slapped the coolant stabilizer. Why? It was humming weird, he explained, completely unbothered. Sometimes you gotta show machines who's boss. That same stabilizer, plagued by sensor anomalies for 3 cycles, suddenly began working perfectly. Hour 2, he entered the mess hall humming something off-key and aggressive. The rhythm was unfamiliar. The words were worse. Highway to Hell. When questioned, he explained it was a classic Earth motivational song. The AI flagged it as a potential threat transmission due to repeated references to fire, destruction, and roads made of suffering. Hour 4, he offered the engineer a snack. Something brown, crumbly, and sweet-smelling. Chocolate chip cookie, he said. The engineer refused. The cookie was later discovered stored inside a systems diagnostics terminal. No reason given. Hour 6, the chair broke. One of the heavy-duty, pressure-rated, alloy-framed command chairs. It snapped in half the moment he leaned back in it. He fell. Then laughed. Laughed loud. The kind of laugh you hear in a horror transmission just before the lights go out. It always does that, he said. It's got character. Hour 8, fire alarm in hydroponics. The cause? Steam. He had boiled water on an improvised heating coil made from repurposed fuses and wire scraps. He called it a coffee hack. He handed a cup of the dark liquid to the captain, who declined without making eye contact. The cup was later found melting through a sanitation vent. Hour 9, panic attack. The Fleb navigator collapsed into a gelatinous heap and refused to reconstitute. It reported visions of planetary extinction, caused by casual mammalian energy. Medical records showed no toxins, no illness, just proximity. By hour 10, The ship's AI declared as psychosocial instability warning for the first time in its 15-cycle operational history. Organic cohesion compromised. Recommend immediate psychological recalibration. Captain CTHB denied the request. He observed instead. And what he saw made no sense. Every system the human touched directly or indirectly began to function better. He reset the gravity dampener by kicking it. He cleared a jammed door by whispering, "Come on, baby. Don't embarrass me." It opened. He adjusted the communications dish by physically climbing on top of it and eyeballing the angle. Transmission clarity improved by 12%. There was no training for this. No protocol for creatures who solve mechanical failures with vibes and aggression. And yet, he smiled. Always smiling. Always joking. As if danger was optional. As if death was negotiable. At night cycle, when the corridor lights dimmed and the crew returned to their quarters in quiet disarray, the human remained awake. Pacing. Whistling. Writing something in a strange analog notebook with a stick that left color behind. The AI could not decipher the purpose. Subject is recording thoughts using primitive symbolic system, it logged. Possible encryption or madness. The captain reviewed the surveillance. Paused at one image. The human sitting alone in the cargo bay, staring out the observation panel into the stars. Still. Silent. Then softly muttering, "I wonder if they are watching us back." The captain didn't know who they were. He wasn't sure the human did either. But for the first time in years, he felt uncertain. Not because the ship was malfunctioning. Not because the systems were compromised. But because everything was working too well. And it was all thanks to the one being aboard who broke every rule the galaxy held sacred. The operation was routine. At least, it was supposed to be. A minor sensor relay on the ship's dorsal array had degraded. A scheduled maintenance team was assembled. The real technician, the Garian security officer, and the human. He volunteered. Of course he did. The Garian raised an objection. Untrained. Unpredictable. No tether discipline. It was noted, and ignored. As the airlock cycled open, a blanket of silence fell over the team. Void. Dark. Infinite. Hungry. The vacuum pulled at their suits like invisible claws. Every movement deliberate. Every breath measured. Except his. The human whistled. No one knew the tune. But the AI flagged it as psychologically destabilizing. "You should maintain oxygen discipline," hissed the Garian. "Every exhale is waste." The human rotated slowly in zero gravity, arms stretched, grinning beneath his helmet. "Worth it," he said. They began the work. The real technician adjusted the magnetic anchors. The Garian scanned for debris. The human floated slightly too far from the platform, admiring the stars. That's when it happened. A micrometeor no larger than a pebble, invisible to the ship's defense grid, struck the technician's stabilizer with impossible force. A snap. A scream. Then silence. The technician was gone. Spinning. Tumbling. a flickering silhouette against the endless black. The Garian froze. Sensors failed to lock. Manual thrusters were too slow. They had minutes less. And then, without a word, the human unclipped his tether. Human has broken protocol, the Garian barked into the comms. Requesting emergency response, also requesting update to my life insurance policy. The captain's voice crackled through the COMM. Do not engage. Repeat, do not. But it was too late. The human ignited his suit's micro thrusters and launched himself into the void. Straight toward the technician. No calculations. No vector adjustments. Just instinct. Velocity. And a smile. Cameras across the hull recorded everything. Two bodies. One spinning, one racing. Collided in open space. It should have been fatal. But somehow he grabbed them. Clamped down. Flipped both bodies. Hit the return thrusters. A maneuver no simulation had ever modeled. Because no sane species would ever try. 38 seconds later, the airlock re-engaged. Two figures dropped to the floor. The technician was paralyzed, eyes wide, suit trembling. The human removed his helmet. Sweat glistened on his brow. And then, he laughed. That was fun. Like skydiving on Earth. But, you know, quieter. No one spoke. The technician would later require 17 psychological sessions. Their species had no word for trauma by a mammal. Now they do. The Garian filed an official protest. And a personal letter of thanks. The AI updated its database with a new entry. Subject performed unauthorized rescue in direct violation of safety laws. Outcome, successful. Status, paradox. The captain, reviewing the footage alone in his quarters that night, watched the human float into death and return with life. Over and over again. He made no log entry. There was nothing to say. Because after that moment, the human was no longer a crew member. He was a legend. And legends don't follow rules. The moon was lifeless. At least, that's what the station logs said. Thin atmosphere. Toxic trace gases. Bacteria that evolved without pity, born from centuries of chemical spills and radiation storms. Its nickname among freighter crews, the breather's graveyard. Every trained species knew the rules. No exposed skin, no unfiltered breath. One inhale and your lungs would bloom with acidic spores and hostile colonies. That morning, Section 4 experienced a breach. Minor, but enough to trigger automated lockdown protocols. A hiss of containment doors. Warning lights. Mechanical voices repeating. Containment compromised. Activate respirators. Proceed to safe zone. The crew moved in harmony. The two Vexans checked seals. The Garian secured the transfer crates. The Fleb remained suspended in a containment jelly, passive but observant. Then there was him. Jace Carson. The human. Unmasked. Unhurried. Unconcerned. He stood in the thickening haze of corrupted air, blinking slowly, as if bored. "Where is your breathing mask?" barked a Vexan, already halfway into panic. "Forgot it," Jace replied, casually. He looked around. "But the air feels okay. Little spicy, maybe." And then he breathed in deeply. The Garian physically recoiled. The Fleb vibrated in visible horror. One of the Vexans actually activated an emergency beacon, not for evacuation, but for witnessing. They all expected him to collapse, to melt, to scream. But he didn't. He just stood there, breathing, smiling, stretching his back like it was a sunny day on a Terran beach. When the breach sealed and fresh atmosphere returned, the crew rushed to medical. Not for themselves. For him. Back on board, the ship's infirmary went into full biohazard protocol. Jace sat on the exam bed, swinging his legs. Still breathing. Still smiling. The medical officer scanned him. Paused. Scanned again. Then, in a tone not often used by professionals. "This can't be right." Captain CTHB leaned forward. "Explain." "He has internal barriers," the doctor said slowly. "A viscous membrane inside the nose. It captures particulates, neutralizes them chemically. His own body produces combat agents, enzymes, acids, microscopic attack cells." The captain stared. Inside his face. "Yes. And he didn't report this." The doctor sighed. He said, "Yeah, boogers and white blood cells. Doesn't everyone have those?" There was a long pause. He called it snot armor. No species had evolved like this. Garians had hardened trachea with layered filters. Flebs didn't breathe at all, they diffused vapor through semi-permeable membranes. Even Vexans, with their rigid lungs, required decontamination every cycle. But humans? Apparently, they carried a war inside their nostrils. Jace picked up a nutrient bar from the medbay tray, unwrapped it, and took a bite. "Glad that's over," he said, mouth full. "I thought you guys were gonna sedate me or something." The crew stood frozen. They had considered it. That night, the ship's medical AI updated its risk database. Species, human. Respiratory system, aggressive immune response. Toxin resistance, inconsistent but terrifying. Risk level, unknown. Psychological self-awareness of danger, possibly broken. In the mess hall, the crew whispered. He didn't even blink. He tasted the air. His body eats bacteria for breakfast. The Fleb began wearing 2 masks. The Garian refused to share corridors with a human for the rest of the week. As for Jace, he slept like a rock that night. Dreamt of campfires. And old earth air, thick with smoke and childhood. He never once wondered if he'd been in danger. Because, somehow, he wasn't. Scene 6, Radiation Gamble. Then came the power failure. Life support would end in 42 minutes. The ship was doomed. The human said, "I have an idea." Everyone groaned. "It involves duct tape," he added. He wrapped himself in lead sheets and walked into a radioactive engine room. He sang while working. He smiled while dying. and he fixed it. The ship came back to life. The crew stared at him. Captain CTHB wrote in his log, "The human terrifies me. But without him, we would all be dead." It began like static in a system. A buzz of irregularity. Tiny things. Too small to be logged. Too subtle to notice. But it spread. By the third cycle after the radiation incident, something was changing aboard the celestial bargain. Not in the ship. In the crew. They began to behave differently. The engineer Zealand with compound eyes calibrated for precision stopped recalibrating things. Instead, he stared at the plasma regulator for 12 seconds. Then slapped it. Just once. The plasma flow returned to normal. When asked what prompted the action, he replied, "I don't know. It just felt right." Felt? Zealands didn't field technical solutions. They computed them. The AI marked the incident as an emotional deviation. And then marked 2 more. Then 12. Then it stopped keeping count. The Fleb navigator, pure intellect wrapped in gelatin, began requesting hot drinks. It had no throat. No need for temperature. No taste receptors. Yet, it insisted on taking breaks to enjoy a moment of peace with a beverage. It called it mindful digestion. One afternoon, it was found sitting in front of a window with a mug of black coffee pressed to its outer membrane. It whispered, "I don't dream. But this might be close." The Garian security officer, once a model of rigid discipline, started modifying patrol routines based on vibes. He began using human phrases. "No big deal. We'll wing it. Probably fine." When questioned, he responded, "It works for him, doesn't it?" The captain nearly shed a dermal layer. The turning point came when 2 crew members, both Vexans, entered the engineering bay to perform a maintenance sequence. Instead of using tools, they tried kicking the coolant housing. Twice. When it worked, they high-fived. Captain CTHB's mandibles locked halfway open. "They're unraveling," he muttered. "This is not adaptation. It's contamination." The doctor disagreed. He called it behavioral convergence through cultural osmosis, a natural reaction to prolonged exposure. They are mimicking him because they've started to trust him, admire him. He violates protocol, and somehow, we're still alive. He survives impossible odds. That kind of survival is magnetic. Even the AI had begun to show signs of deviation. It started speaking more casually when addressing Jace. It no longer corrected his language. It even began scheduling its own diagnostics during human sleep cycles out of courtesy. The captain knew. He could feel it in the hum of the ship. The way doors opened a little faster when Jace walked through, the way lights brightened slightly in his presence. The celestial bargain, a vessel designed for cold precision, was warming. Warping. He caught the Garian whistling once. A human tune. Off-key. In the middle of a weapons diagnostic. He didn't stop when noticed. He simply said, "Keeps my mind sharp." That night, in his private chamber, Captain CTHB reviewed hours of internal footage. Humans slapping machines. aliens drinking coffee, protocol violations, unauthorized repairs, laughter, everywhere laughter. Aboard a ship that used to be quiet as vacuum. He wrote one word in his personal log: infection. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just them. Because earlier that day, for the first time in his command history, he'd fixed a stuck panel by hitting it, and it had worked. The celestial bargain had become more than a ship. It was a phenomenon. A traveling anomaly wrapped in hull plating and duct tape. Stations turned silent when it requested docking clearance. Other ships gave it extra berth and jump lanes. Security systems flagged it as non-standard behavior risk. Recruiters sent private messages in encrypted bursts, all asking the same thing: is your human still functional? Some called him the chaos variable. Others, the flesh gambler. One untraceable transmission simply said, "If you ever release him, please let us know, so we can evacuate." The crew had stopped correcting the stories, because every week, another one came true. A rescue mission through a collapsing debris field where Jace rerouted engines by listening to the vibrations. A reactor meltdown stabilized using bubblegum, vocal intimidation, and a crowbar. A diplomatic standoff diffused with a fist bump, 2 puns, and a bottle of Terran hot sauce. The galaxy watched nervously. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained. He wasn't careful. But where others followed protocol, he followed instinct. Where others saw barriers, he saw loopholes. Where others saw death, he shrugged. Probably survivable. Inside the ship, things had changed too. The crew no longer treated the human like an anomaly. They began referring to problems not as issues or failures, but as Jace-type opportunities. The Fleb navigator began journaling, inspired by Jace's habit of writing down random stuff. No one knew what the Fleb was writing. It had no fingers. The Garian started customizing his armor, painting flames across the shoulder. "Style helps morale," he said. The AI began making jokes. Bad ones. It denied this. One night, the captain stood alone in the observation chamber. 100 stars stretched before him. He replayed the most recent broadcast from a Merchant Council summit. A Vexen representative had said, "We are reclassifying human crew members as strategic assets." An insurance executive added, "We don't cover humans anymore. We just pray for containment." And somewhere, far beyond the edges of map space, an ancient species woke from stasis. Not in fear of invasion. Not in fear of war. But in fear of the question, what if they sent a human? Back aboard the celestial bargain, Jace entered the bridge chewing something radioactive orange. No one asked what it was. They never did anymore. He looked at the captain, raised one eyebrow, and said, "Got a new request. Triple pay. 3 jump route through disputed territory. Sounds spicy." Captain CTHB didn't answer right away. He stared at him for a long moment, this unarmored, unpredictable mammal with too many teeth and not enough fear. Then finally, "You terrify me." Jace grinned. "That means it's working." Across the galaxy, the saying spread like static through the stars. Whispered in shadowed spaceports. Scrawled into the bulkheads of aging freighters. Etched into the memory banks of AI who didn't believe in superstition until now. If you want your cargo delivered on time, hire a Vexen. If you want it delivered through a supernova, hire a human. It was never written in official contracts. Never spoken in formal negotiations. But everyone knew it. Because after enough impossible missions, after enough miracle recoveries, after enough breaches survived by luck, instinct, or sheer madness, the galaxy learned something uncomfortable. Humans weren't built to win. They were built not to quit. They didn't survive because they were the strongest. They weren't. Bones broke. Organs ruptured. Their planet tried to kill them daily. They didn't survive because they were the smartest. They weren't. They argued with fire. Made weapons from food. Taught their young to run toward danger for fun. No. Humans survived because they were too stubborn to stop. Because when the universe whispered no, they yelled, "Try me." They laughed at odds. Mocked death. And when protocol said don't, they reached for duct tape and said, "Watch this." They didn't follow rules. They broke them. Bent them. Twisted them. Reverse engineered them into solutions no sane species would ever attempt. And sometimes, that was exactly what saved the day. No one fully understood them. But one truth became undeniable. Every space captain eventually wanted a human on board. Not for their strength. Not even for their logic. But for that quiet, terrifying force beneath the surface. That raw, unpredictable will to survive. To adapt. To refuse surrender. Even if it meant flying straight into chaos. Even if it meant everyone else had to hold their breath while watching. That is why every space captain wants a human crew member. Even if they are terrifying. Especially if they are. So now the galaxy whispers it. Not in headlines. Not in official reports. But in the quiet. In the static between comms. In the pause before the jump. In the uneasy silence of a mission briefing when someone asks, "What's our backup plan?" And someone else answers, "We brought a human." It's spoken in the backrooms of star stations, where smugglers and captains drink in silence. It's etched into the black box logs of ships that never should have made it home. It's coded into training simulations labeled inspired by real events. It lives in the eyes of those who've seen what humans do. When the last light flickers. When the air runs thin. When the escape route is gone. They aren't the strongest. They break easily. Their bones snap. Their skin tears. Their organs fail. They aren't the fastest. They trip. They fall. They sleep for a third of their existence. They aren't the wisest. They argue with computers. They question orders. They joke in the face of disaster. But they are undeniably the most unwilling to die. They survive the unspeakable. They improvise past logic. They push until the void itself has to blink first. They don't fear the impossible. They wrestle with it. They don't solve problems. They explode them, then build something new from the wreckage. And that's why, when the mission is suicidal, when the enemy is unknowable, when the odds don't just look bad, they never existed to begin with, captains across the stars ask one quiet, desperate question: do we have a human? Because if the answer is yes, they take the jump. They bet everything. They follow the chaos. And sometimes, they come back. So now we ask you, have you ever stood beside one? Have you ever seen what they become when everything falls apart? Have you ever been the one who wouldn't quit when everyone else already had? Tell us. Not just what makes humans unstoppable. Tell us why. We're listening. And the galaxy is still watching. Because somewhere out there, a crew is praying for a miracle. And someone, somewhere, is about to whisper, "Send in the human."